Michael Venom Page versus Ian Garry is so goddamn fascinating. To me, it is the most interesting fight on UFC 303. I have spent the last forever just going back and forth on this matchup, mulling it over into my head, watching these guys fight over and over and over again. And what is so difficult about making a prediction about this matchup is that Michael Venom Page's style is so different from anything you see in MMA. I mean, it really doesn't matter how much of Ian Garry you've watched. You cannot find him fighting anybody who does anything like Michael Venom Page. I mean, that is just the fact of the matter. And on top of that, Ian Garry, I mean, he's so young, he's still rising up the rankings. There's frankly still a lot to learn about him. But I think I've finally, based on what we know from these two guys, I think I have come to the best possible conclusion one could with the information provided, and that is that Ian Garry, I think he's going to get knocked out. I think Michael Venom Page is going to knock out Ian Garry. And I think the main reasoning for me to coming to that conclusion is the fact that Ian Garry relies heavily on length and speed at 170. I mean, weight-wise, he's actually a very, very small welterweight. During his last fight against Geoff Neal, on fight night, he was 180 pounds. But what he sacrifices in strength and size, he gets back with speed and elusiveness. I mean, you look up any Ian Garry fight, it's the same exact thing. It's him using really high-level movement, maintaining distance, throwing a lot of absolutely insanely fast kicks, timing good punches, and just staying at range the entire time, making guys come to him. He is so good at doing that. But in this matchup, none of that skill set is really going to translate here because Michael Venom Page is just as tall, he's longer, he has a much longer reach, and I honestly think he's faster. I mean, at the very least, the way he closes distance, he's going to be way faster than Ian Garry is. You can make the argument perhaps that Ian Garry's strikes themselves are going to be faster, but what that bladed stance allows you to do, it allows you to move forward and backwards so much quicker than a traditional kickboxing stance. I mean, it's really not comparable. That is going to be a really serious problem because Ian Garry is going to have to try to find a way to close the distance. And he's never, ever had to do that before. I mean, the one other time he fought somebody with a comparable height and reach was when he fought Neil Magny. And, you know, that's just a very different fight. You know what I mean? I mean, Neil Magny is just not MVP in any sense of the word. But we have seen MVP have to fight somebody taller, well, sorry, not taller, same height but longer in Kevin Holland. And now I actually, as I was making this video, a very prominent figure in the MMA community gave their comments about this fight. And what they said about Kevin Holland fighting MVP, they said that he was just the reason why he couldn't do anything against MVP was because he was just being lazy and that he didn't care. Which, you know, that is certainly something you can say for sure. But the thing about that fight that's so insane to me was MVP kept such a long distance between them. I mean, the range he was maintaining between himself and Kevin Holland was insane. And the way he was able to cover that distance so quickly with no telegraph, I mean, it was crazy. Hey, look, the fact of the matter was Kevin Holland could not get a timing on MVP's speed. He had zero success with it, despite the fact that there was a huge amount of distance between them that MVP was needing to cover to land strikes. And even with that, he was too fast. Holland could not get the timing at all. I've seen a lot of people say that Ian Garry is going to win this fight because he's not worried about making it boring like Kevin Holland. He's willing to stay on the outside, stay long, use a lot of movement, but, I mean, I just don't think it's that simple. Look, if Ian Garry can pull that off, he's fucking special. Because, I mean, he would be doing it against one of the best point fighters MMA has ever seen. And I just do not think he can maintain the same amount of distance as MVP can and be as effective. But, of course, Ian Garry is not Kevin Holland. Ian Garry is quicker. Ian Garry has way better kicks, but he does have a lot less power. I mean, the one thing that is very clear from watching Ian Garry fight is, he does a very good job maintaining distance, he lands good strikes, but his opponents are almost always wading forward, absorbing his punches, and they keep on coming. But they usually have a really difficult time tracking him down because Ian Garry is so much taller, longer, and he has really good movement. But the one time we've really seen him hurt, it was against Song, and it came because Song just didn't really respect Ian Garry's punching power as much as he did his kicks. Because Ian stepped in with a body shot, and he wasn't as concerned with the power coming his way as he was with just landing a counter. Now, of course, I would say Ian also made the mistake of just not following up that body shot with anything. I mean, he just stood in the pocket after throwing it, which is a recipe to get countered, but it overall stems from the fact that he just didn't respect Ian Garry's power. But of course, Ian Garry does pose some issues to Kevin Holland. I mean, and I do see one pretty interesting path to victory that, if I was in Ian Garry's corner, I would be really trying to get him to do. And that is, of course, his kicks. Now, landing a head kick on somebody who uses that karate blitz as well as Kevin Holland does, it's going to be a serious, serious problem because of the way he can move forward and back so quickly. I could see him timing a leg kick off of MVP's entry, but God, good luck timing a head kick right as MVP is blitzing forward. That's going to be really difficult to do. But I do think if Ian Garry is to pressure MVP up against the fence, that is where a head kick can really open up. I saw Douglas Lima do this exact same thing to MVP, though he went for a body kick himself. But because he had backed MVP up against the fence, that head kick was there if he had gone for it. Because MVP keeps his hands down, blocking the head kick isn't really an option for him. He relies on movement to get out of the way of strikes. So, if you can get him up against the fence, that's where shots like that are really going to open up. But, of course, at range, if I'm Ian Garry, I'm really looking to land the calf kick. His kicks have no tell. They're extremely fast. And the one time we have seen MVP get finished, it was against Douglas Lima, who's known for having some of the best calf kicks in MMA. He landed it right as MVP was blitzing forward and then was able to land the uppercut off of it. Now, of course, this can be very risky because if you time the leg kick just a second too late, you're eating that full power right hand while you're off balance, and that's just a recipe to get knocked down. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, he used the blitz beautifully. It's a serious problem to anybody who fights him, but the difference between him and MVP is, MVP has real one-punch knockout power. Timing that kind of speed with that amount of power, it's scary. It is very, very scary to come up against. But other than the calf kick at range, it's going to be tricky for Ian Garry to really get his kicks off. For one, Ian Garry loves the teep. He's very, very good with it, very, very quick, and it maintains a distance for him very, very well. But MVP, because he's standing sideways, the kick to the stomach's not going to be there. That's why the teep is so important in Muay Thai, because the stance is way more straight, way more squared. But when you have that bladed stance, the teep is not there at all. Now, if MVP chooses to stand orthodox, that body kick would be there, but that is an if. If I'm MVP, I'm going to try to stand southpaw. It completely eliminates the back kick from Ian Garry. It also really makes it difficult to land effective calf kicks. And then at that point, Ian is going to have to rely on his boxing, which we know he doesn't have the reach MVP does. He doesn't have the power MVP does either. And I just don't know if he can find the timing off MVP's blitzes. I don't know if anybody can. We know nobody has really been able to time it on Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. And Thompson does not have the power MVP does. I just think if Ian Garry is to win this fight, we're going to have to see skills from him we've never really seen before. Like I said, he's always been the one to be on his bike, using movement to maintain distance. Well, now he needs to be the one closing distance, and he's not as good at doing that as Michael Venom Page. Now, I've seen some people claim, well, maybe Ian Garry should try to wrestle him. I don't know. The last loss we've seen from Michael Venom Page was a split decision loss against, what the fuck's his name? Storley. Now, Storley was a 4-time Division I All-American wrestler, and he hit some beautiful takedowns on Michael Venom Page. He's a super, super high-level grappler, but he had a really difficult time controlling MVP on the ground. There were a lot of moments of just kind of stalling and holding MVP up against the fence, which, according to the judging criteria that Bellator also follows, Storley really didn't do any damage. I mean, there was a lot of moments of just holding up against the fence, but he got the split decision because the judges don't know the criteria very well. So more power to him. Of course, I don't think Ian Garry has that same wrestling ability as Storley does. Now, Kevin Holland was able to control Michael on the ground for a bit, but, that came because they ended up in a weird transition off the clinch from the back where he was kind of able to get a rear naked choke, but he didn't quite have the angle on it, so Page was forced to flatten out on his back. That's just a difficult position to replicate strategy-wise, but, like I said, I think Ian Garry has some paths to victory. If I'm him, I'm trying to back Michael Venom Page up against the fence, and I'm trying to land a head kick. I don't know if he can do that, though. I think out in the open, he gets knocked out. It's just that simple.